Dr. Robert Mathenge is our guest this morning. He's back to the studio as a consultant, interventional cardiologist, and phlebotomist. He's a section head of cardiology at the Nairobi Hospital and many other things. Before we welcome him, City, give him that proverb from Equatorial Guinea.
This is our final proverb from the country of Equatorial Guinea.
Okay.
Very many unique things. Longest serving president in the world. The other interesting thing is his vice president is his son. Unique, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, a proverb. Wherever a man goes to dwell, his character goes with him.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Wherever a man goes to dwell,
His character
goes with him.
How true. Wow.
Wherever you are, character
with
Follows
you.
you.
Like you, Daktari, when you left Nairobi Hospital, your character came with you.
It's here.
That is a daunting truth.
It is, eh? So Ndu is wearing a watch. It's a Samsung Galaxy Watch 5. And we told her to do it before you get in so that you can tell us the condition of her heart, because the watch tells us. But now you can start by singing, "Where do broken hearts go?" Sing that.
This one is setting you up, isn't it?
Properly. ECG. This heart can tell your ECG at this heart.
This heart.
This watch can tell your ECG activity and can tell me if the state of my heart is good, broken, okay. ECG. And Eric wanted to know, what? A watch that can do that? Yeah, actually. So how exactly does it do that? And what does it show? It's the Samsung Watch 5.
That's it, eh?
And what do you do with the information?
That's a question, Ndu. Where do broken hearts go?
You determine whether you
Can they find their way to the doctor?
Yes, because usually that's what it is. Because that watch also tells you stress levels. It can measure stress levels.
Whether you've slept enough.
Yes.
Whether you need to sleep some more.
Okay.
Those 10,000 steps you told us to take can also tell you if you're at 8,455.
Absolutely.
Things like that.
One could argue
They can find their way home.
it is the sort of companion someone of your caliber and stature needs.
Yes, but I think it's even more useful where it is right now, because it empowers her.
Yeah.
It empowers her. She's now empowered. She doesn't need Dr. Mathenge to tell her that I need to do something about my health. So I think this is a good tool. And remember, all about health today is empowering the individual.
Right.
I think that's when you get the best outcomes, when you empower the people. So you are right now empowered.
Thank you very much.
Make good use
Of the empowerment.
of the empowerment.
Yes.
Okay? Sawa.
Sawa.
And you know where broken hearts should go.
They will find their way home. Back to the open.
Back to the open arms.
Of the
And
love
these
that
hands
we
will not let your heart break. Daktari,
Yes.
thank you very much for joining us again today. Today, we want to talk about hypertension.
Yes.
And as we were promoting this, we were asking ourselves, so hypertension, high blood pressure, are they the same?
Okay.
What is hypertension?
Okay. Now, I must start by saying that hypertension and high blood pressure is literally the same kind of condition when we discuss. Some people call it high blood pressure, others hypertension. But what is it really talking about? It's talking about that pressure that drives your heart, that drives blood through your blood vessels. Your heart pumps blood so as to enable your cells to get oxygen, glucose, and all that. You can imagine there has to be a circulatory system. That circulatory system has to have energy from a certain source, and the source is the heart itself. It has what we call contractility, the squeezing power. When it squeezes, then that driving pressure is what now transmits the blood throughout the system. If it is low, blood may not get where it is going. If it is too high, then it can cause damage to the vessels themselves. So in other words, the blood pressure is really what you feel when you feel your pulse. You are going to feel a certain upstroke. That is the high what you call the top pressure. And when the heart relaxes, then the pressure goes down. So it's a pulsatile thing. But the whole purpose is to drive blood through the system so that we can do two things. Number one, you have to generate energy. For me to speak, I have to generate energy. So the food I ate, the glucose, the oxygen, they have to be delivered to the cells. When delivered to the cells, then the chemical processes develop the energy that I need. And after that, there are going to be waste products, water, carbon dioxide, stuff, and other waste products. They also have to come out. Otherwise, they'll poison the body. Now, they come out through another system. What brings in the good things are the arteries. And what now gets out the waste products are the veins, okay? And that system requires pressure to drive it. Now, when it is within normal limits, it's okay. If it is too low, it's a problem. If it's too high, it's a problem. And there are many processes in between that determine, what's going to happen in terms of is it too high and what are the consequences, etc.
When would you say then that it becomes a problem? Because, sometimes you go for a checkup, whatever, they take your they take your pressure, isn't it? And then they say, okay, let's give it a few minutes and let's check again. When does it become a problem? Because you could have had activity, you could have come walking, you could have come, done something, and maybe your pressure is high, and then they say, let's try it again later. When is it an issue then for something to be done about it, or even when it is low? When does it become an issue? Because you might feel a flash of stress and you feel, but it's not something that you feel regularly. Well, when it becomes regular, is that when now it becomes an issue?
The diagnosis of high blood pressure is something that needs to be done very carefully, because blood pressure can be affected by many things. For instance, as I was coming, we kind of lost the way, almost lost the way, and I got a bit concerned. Hey, the line is coming, and
am I going to be late?
That in itself, if I get here and immediately now you're the doctor and you take my blood pressure, it will be high. It will probably be 145 over 93. Okay. If you were to imagine that that's my blood pressure and start me on medication, you'd probably be wrong, because after I sat here for 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes, probably my blood pressure now has come down to maybe 135 over 85. So in other words, there are certain circumstances that we recommend under which blood pressure should be taken. Number one, it should never be taken when you just walk into a place, come out of the traffic jam, come out of a park somewhere, then walk into the office. You need to rest for 10, 15 minutes, okay? Seated, relaxed. That allows all the changes in blood pressure from activity. Remember, if I put you right now on a treadmill, tell you to exercise, I'll see your blood pressure systematically going up. After 3 minutes, I'll see your blood pressure is 155 over 95. After 6 minutes, it will be 165 over 95. And I could drive it through exercise to 200 over 110. But after we finish the treadmill, and I tell you to relax, it gradually come down to 130 over 80. Okay? So in other words, there are certain circumstances that we recommend. Number one, once you take some minutes, relax. The other things that we talk about are things like taking caffeine, tea, coffee. You've just taken a nice cup of tea, you should wait for at least 45 minutes before you do a blood pressure, because caffeine will raise your heart rate, will raise your blood pressure. If, for instance, you've just walked in and you wanted to see the doctor quickly, but you have a full bladder, a bladder that is full and pain, discomfort, you are literally moving, but you don't want to miss the appointment. You want, another patient will go in before you. So you're staying there with a totally full bladder. When your blood pressure is taken, it will be high. So we recommend go make sure your bladder is empty, okay? You are comfortable.
You'll be relaxed.
There will be a lot of overdiagnosis and over-treatment. So those are the circumstances. And then there are those people, we say, in the hospital environment, they have what Professor Muga here would tell you, white coat hypertension. People, by the anxiety of being in a hospital environment, you are going to meet this doctor and you don't know what kind of information you are going to get. What are you going to be told about your health that you did not know? There are some people, about 1 in 5 people, will have persistent high blood pressures when they come to the clinic. But when they are at home, their blood pressures are normal.
Yeah.
So we have a certain way to diagnose them. 2 things. We can either put a monitor. You come to the office, we put a monitor on you. You carry it, that you take your blood pressure every 15 minutes, 4 times in an hour during the day, and 2 times in an hour during the night. So you have like 80 readings throughout a 24-hour period. Or if you have a gadget at home, we give you circumstances under which you can do home monitoring. It's even cheaper. You do home monitoring. So those people, we have to really make a diagnosis on them based on what we call ambulatory blood pressure monitoring or home monitoring. Because persistently, they'll tell you, Doctor, but when I'm at home,
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
Until
when
I
I come
see
here,
you.
my blood pressure is 160 over 100. Are you going to put me on treatment? We do have, so we have that also what we call labile hypertension, reactive, people whose blood pressures go up. But we have ways of telling whether they need treatment or not by sometimes checking to see whether is it affecting them in any way. You could look into their eyes, look at the back of the eyes, see whether the arteries are changing. You could do an ECG. In a specialist clinic, like in our clinics, we can actually do an echo. If we find that there are early subtle changes due to high blood pressure, then we are going to say, although your pressure comes on only at this particular times, there are times it's normal, it is having an effect on you, and therefore we'll need to treat it.
Okay.
So in other words, we have to be careful about diagnosis because, again, we don't want to miss people who have hypertension because they're always missed. It's a big problem. Again, we don't want to overtreat because that has consequences also. There are side effects to medication. There is the cost of medication and all that. So it's something that needs to be weighed and done carefully.
Well, at the risk of those listening who would then go into some kind of self-diagnosis, what are some of the symptoms of high blood pressure?
Now, I'm sure you may have heard, we do not rely on symptoms for blood pressure. If you wait for symptoms, you never, you're going to be in trouble, okay? So,
Okay.
if you wait for symptoms, because the pressure coming up in your system is usually silent most of the time.
Sure, but Terry, we're operating in a society whereby until and unless there is something that you feel,
Yes.
the chances of the majority of people bringing themselves to a medical facility to be checked are very low. I understand that care-seeking behavior is actually not, it doesn't do very well
Yes.
in our communities until you feel pain. I mean, we've had people testifying who've had cancer and say, look, why was I going to go and get a test when I felt nothing?
Yeah, I was okay.
Right? I was fine. Until something else happened is when I was told, and here I was with stage 4 cervical cancer, right? Now, when you feel something is what it urges you.
It's when you
There are very few, we've seen the
seek
numbers.
care. That's when you seek care.
We've seen the numbers. There are very few people who are even going for a yearly checkup. So again, with high blood pressure, which again we are told is affecting numerous people in the society, until you have cold sweat or, feeling that, you're not going to go to the doctor to check.
You know what you've said is really the real problem with high blood pressure. But let me put it this way. About maybe 10% of the people might feel something. Okay? The majority don't feel. Yeah. Probably 90% of the people don't feel anything. There are some people who get a bit of a headache. And surely, there are some people who clearly when their pressures go up, they have some headache. But the reason we cannot rely on that is because maybe 9 out of 10 will not feel anything. So if you tell people, if you have headache, if you don't have headache, you may not have high blood pressure. Then, of course, a lot of people get in trouble. There are some other people who might even feel a little dizzy, okay? There are other people, when it is very high, then when it is now starting to complicate, is starting to affect the function of the heart. Then they'll get shortness of breath when they walk. They may even have water in the body. So remember, those are now people who are presenting with the signs. But most of the times, if you wait for symptoms, then it presents in a catastrophic way.
Sure.
Catastrophically. In other words, in a boardroom or in a meeting like this, God forbid, a stroke,
So
okay,
then
a bleed in the head,
there's a possibility of a lot of people
a
walking
dissection,
around. Yeah.
or the pressure being so high, it splits the pipe, like the aorta. It's called the aorta. Okay, dissection. Those are catastrophic presentations,
Sheesh.
which are really catastrophic, in terms of the outcomes and all that.
I'll
So
say,
because we do not rely on symptoms, and that's the main challenge for hypertension. Because if you look at like the survey done in Kenya in 2015, the number of Kenyans who have high blood pressure who are on treatment were not more than 20%.
So are we saying
Now-
that there's a high possibility of many more people in the community with high blood pressure but have not gone in to seek care or even seek diagnosis?
And that's what exactly I'm saying. Because of the challenge you have raised, this is not a disease that you're going to develop and then it drives you like a pneumonia where you start getting cough and chest pain, you go. Because it is not like that. Most people are undiagnosed. They do not know that they have hypertension. Most people. In fact, in that survey, only even people who have high blood pressure who are on treatment were not more than 20%. In other words, most people number one, are not detected.
All right.
Because you have to have some other way of detecting them other than people taking themselves to hospital because they are feeling unwell. Okay? And even because of that, again, even when you are detected and you are started on treatment, you don't know, you are not able to use your signs and symptoms to monitor yourself. If it's a pneumonia, you know when you stop coughing, you are okay. For blood pressure, you don't know.
You don't know when you're okay.
You don't know when you are okay and when you are not, till you go to the doctor or and unless you are empowered like you and you can do your own blood pressure. So that means that detection is very poor, control is very poor, and treatment is very poor. Those people who offer themselves treatment, and also control is very poor. Very few people are controlled because most people assume once you see the doctor and you are put on a tablet, you're okay.
Okay.
Only to find that you needed a bit of monitoring to find out whether that dose is enough. Maybe it brought your blood pressure from 170 to 150, 170 over 100 to 150 over 90, okay? But you needed addition of another little tablet to now bring it to 130 over 80. So control is also a challenge. So you find, and it's not only a challenge in our own environment here, because the challenge here is much, much higher. In fact, when we are talking about people on treatment here, about 20%, and women a little more than men, in the best of places, we are talking about 60 to 70%. In the best of places, everybody else is in between there. And that is being on treatment. And when it comes to those who are controlled, almost everywhere in the world, you hardly ever get even 50% control because of the same challenges. You're put on medication, you're on treatment, but this does not have any signs that will tell you are not yet optimal, okay? You're not yet optimal. So you stay uncontrolled till you take yourself to a doctor or you monitor it by yourself. So these are the challenges of high blood pressure. It's really a big challenge out there in the community. And because of that, we have a lot of poor outcomes, driven by high blood pressure in society. The strokes, the heart attacks. We have a lot of outcomes just due to high blood pressure.
Dr. Ali, there's one thing I've not heard you say. The cause. So there are reasons why somebody's blood pressure could go up, like you've said. You walked, you got into a doctor, there's some anxiety because of pre-something. Pre-exam, pre-interview, anxiety, you're late. So those things are just keep happening in your daily life. But it's not high blood pressure. It's basically your pressure going up and then it comes back and stabilizes.
Yes.
But when it becomes a disease, what is it that causes it to become like a constant high?
Yes.
What causes that?
What causes? I think if you look historically, and I think we mentioned that before, if you look at our society, and I remember I mentioned that, like there's somebody who went to Nyanza, North Kavirondo in 1929 and looked at 1,800 people from the age of 15 to 70, Of course, I don't know how he literally knew the ages of these people.
In
1929. But there are ways, anthropometric ways of
dating.
telling. They had scientific ways. they had scientific ways of looking at the bone age and all that between 15 and 70, and they looked over a 2-year period. They did not find a single case of high blood pressure. And they found other kind of diseases, like a bit of rheumatic, a bit of congenital and all that. So when you look at that, that was a society in 1929. And you look, if you go there now, you find that at least 1 in 4 of those people will have high blood pressure. A quarter. And in fact, some studies have shown up to 40 to 50%. Of people of adults, in our country, have high blood pressure. So you look and you see how it happened. What was the difference between then and now, And at that time, I remember when I looked at that, I found it interesting because they said when they compared with the white people, they said, therefore, this is civilization is what has caused this. These people are not civilized. And we are civilized. That's why we have high blood pressure in 1929. So civilization
was the cause.
was the cause. That was this was a researcher, and he came out and said, you can, and he is actually correct. Only that, but so now, in other words, if we were to look at it, I would now say what caused it. I think for us now, I would say it is colonization.
I would call it.
It's colonization.
Modern day living.
Modern day living. It's not colonization.
Not particularly. I wouldn't call it that. You see, the thing is, the racial overtones will actually move us away from what it is that modernization has done.
Yes.
Because it has brought about changes in lifestyle. It has a restructuring of communities. Just the novelty of things, just dealing with things you're not accustomed to. If I'm to go by the description and the definitions you've given, that will raise your blood pressure.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, it's on a light touch.
Yes.
In terms of civilization, you can, there's a connotation of what happened to get you civilized.
Yes, that's what I'm calling it. If you leave the racial overtones aside.
On a light touch, what has cost us is that is westernization. I mean, we have, in other words, if we look at our culture at that time, what our dietary habits at that time, what our physical activity, habits at that time, what were our stress levels and societal management of stress at that particular time. What has civilization, westernization does to really, that's done to all those things. For instance, in terms of diet, clearly we had the kind of diet that is today you find being recommended today to lower blood pressure.
We did not eat processed foods.
We did not eat processed foods. We did not eat a lot of salt.
No.
We did not have imbalances of high sugar, sweetened things. We ate a lot of vegetable farm produce, fresh meats, and only on occasion. So in other words, those are the things we need to look at. Number one is diet in terms of causing high blood pressure. The other thing is even the BMI. I imagine, unless you correct me, in 1929 you'd have been unlikely to see, somebody in the so-called North Kavirodo with a big pot belly, right? The shape of the human being, the BMI.
But even then,
the chief, only the chief.
You are right, because the diet that people had then would not lend itself to such a shape to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
So in other words, like for instance, obesity in Kenya today, again in that study, was like in men about 27%. BMIs, and women about 38%. And you find that the same proportion of men in society, same proportion as the BMI, have high blood pressure. So you can see the relationship between body shape and high blood pressure. Our body shapes have changed. If your great-great-parents came alive, they will not recognize you today. They wonder what kind of, is this a human being? Because your shape is different. It's completely different.
Actually, what you say lends itself to a certain truth that is being spoken of in the West, specifically the Scandinavian countries and the Dutch. Because the Dutch are the tallest people in the world.
Yes.
And the Danes and so forth follow. But it's being associated with the diet that they've had from a very early age. And they talk about meat, milk, dairy diets.
Absolutely.
See?
Absolutely.
And the argument, the discussion around that with the finding that I was reading was that they had overtaken the Americans, who are considered to be the tallest. Now, remember, they're not just tall. Americans are tall and huge.
Yes.
But these fellows are tall and sinewy.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I'm simply saying that your discussion around the diet is actually profound to this entire thing. And that's why I was saying that if you looked at any African society, even if somebody had a pot belly, the likelihood of that person being unhealthy was slim. Yes. It was
just the chief, because the chief does nothing.
Yes. Because of
apart from ordering people around.
Just ordering people and eating every time somebody comes.
Too many free
eat.
goods.
Yes, every time somebody comes, eat. we are eating. Let's take a break, Doc. Then we'll continue the conversation shortly. 26 to 10. This is a situation room. Dr. Robert Mathenge is a consultant, interventional cardiologist and phlebologist. He's also the head of the cardiology section at the Nairobi Hospital. He is also with the Equatorial Heart and Blood Vessel Clinic. He's here today because we're talking about hypertension. We want to understand the causes, the symptoms, and the treatment of hypertension. Keep it here for more conversations coming up shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
So, Dr. you're saying mainly it's lifestyle.
Yes.
That is a cause of high blood pressure in the society. And it's difficult to diagnose. And for several reasons. One, our care-seeking behavior. And two, even when you go to the hospital and you present yourself, it's not about the symptoms. At that point, it's too late.
Yes.
Or it's not too late, it's late. So what should we do then so that we can tell that you're actually at the onset of high blood pressure?
In terms of, I would like to, something we mentioned during the break, that people, we need to realize the impact of hypertension in health today. And I would like to recap some of the figures we had mentioned earlier. That out of 2019, out of the 18 million people who died of cardiovascular disease, 85% of them were due to heart attacks and strokes all over the world. 85%. 3/4 of those deaths were in countries like ours. We have this notion of thinking these are diseases of the West. The West has managed to identify these risk factors, not only the West, the rest of most of the world, and work on them. 3/4 of those are in countries like ours. 3/4 of that 18 million.
Is that the banana? So what do you call them, City?
Low and
middle income.
Third World Banana Republic.
The low and middle income countries, or the Third World Banana Republic?
Yeah.
Which one were you referring to?
That's the one you normally call them.
But that's exactly what they are.
Countries like ours.
It's countries like ours. I mean, we're being told you're low income. The moment you do not have a very large portion of your population out of what we call the poverty level, then you can't call yourself anything other than a third world
Banana Republic.
You can't. I mean, how else do you call yourself that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, back to Doc. So a majority of those deaths occurred in countries such as ours.
Countries such as
undeveloped.
Low and middle income. Kenya is a low middle income country, and the majority, I mean, as far as we are told by the economics. Now, the majority of those are in those countries. Now, out of those, how much of that is driven by high blood pressure? For strokes, about half of those deaths are driven by high blood pressure alone. Wow. Forget about all those other factors. Wow. The majority of those millions of people who die from stroke, half of them are driven by high blood pressure as a primary cause. And about almost a similar number, about 40-45% are driven of death from heart attacks are driven by, again, high blood pressure. You can see the impact of high blood pressure. And remember, now, when you look at the distribution of high blood pressure all over the world again, you would say, I think there are like 1.3 billion people today all over the world with high blood pressure. About 80 to 85% of all those people are again in low and middle income countries like ours. Why is that? That was not the situation 30 years ago. 30 years ago and beyond, the majority of those people were in the West, okay? But now it has shifted to us. Why? Because we have embraced all those risk factors, but we have not embraced the interventions, okay, that prevent people from getting high blood pressure. So you can see that your chance of getting into what are we trying to prevent here? We are trying to prevent premature death and disability. If you don't control your blood pressure, which really is a reflection of many other things, including your physical activity, your weight, and all that, you are likely to reduce your lifespan by 20 to 30 years. Instead of getting to about 100 where your genes allow you to get, as human beings, your genes, you are going to find that a stroke may come in at the age of 70, when naturally, of course, people do get, you have to exit from something, most of it will be a stroke, around, it should happen in the late 90s, 100 years. So if you don't control your blood pressure, then premature strokes, heart attacks, organ failures like kidney failures come 20 to 30 years earlier. And it is today is the most prevalent cause of premature death, which denies you a good, long quality of life, denies the nation years of productivity, and of course, family life. So I think we all need to look at high blood pressure as a significant cause of premature death and disability, and therefore, and to be the commonest preventable cause. It is the commonest and preventable cause, okay? Because it happens in so many people. So you can imagine how many people are being admitted today in hospital because of high blood pressure. If it is something that happened in 1 out of 20, but you are talking about something that is happening in 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3. So you can imagine the cost to the nation in terms of building infrastructure to treat it, training people to treat it, buying medicines to treat it, and all that. Yet, other countries have managed to lower all these things by working on the interventions, because we know the risk factors. We know them, including tobacco use, including excessive alcohol use. We see a lot of young people in their 30s and 35. When I see somebody walking into my office is 35, living on the fast line, and their blood pressure is, and they have come with high blood pressure. All you ask them is, how much alcohol are you taking? How much sleep are you doing? Yes. Are you smoking? And you find that their blood pressure at the age of 35 is just due to excessive alcohol use, smoking, for those who smoke, and of course the diet itself, which affects them. So, in other words, it is a problem. And remember, like I said, 80% of all these diseases are lifestyle related. And you can change your life's course into a longer, good quality, enjoyable, longer life, okay? By just adopting, identifying, or making yourself aware of the risk factors and working on them.
Some of one group in society that seems to also be highly affected by this is women. Why is that? We also see that there's something they call, we see that there's conditional diabetes, conditional high blood pressure, especially with pregnancy for women. Sometimes after the lifespan of a pregnancy, the high blood pressure disappears, but in some cases it remains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is this, and why do we see higher prevalence that we've seen in women?
Incidentally, I remember I said, when you look at obesity and body mass index is quite significantly associated with high blood pressure. And it's interesting that you find in men, you find at 27%, incidence of hypertension, and you look at the obesity in Kenya, it will be about 27. In women, you look at about 38% incidence of obesity, and you find that about 38% incidence of hypertension. So in other words, there is more obesity for reasons that maybe we can discuss in women, okay? But also there are other factors that come in. There are other subtle causes of high blood pressure, even like contraceptive pills. So in other words, and of course there are those conditional circumstances, one of which of course is contraceptives, pregnancy, etc. So in other words, we do have that, but again, there's something positive in that you find that more women are on treatment than men. In fact, you find that for some reason, in fact, in the previous surveys in Kenya, you find that when only 10% of men will be on treatment, about 20% of women will be on treatment.
So are we saying, therefore, Dr. that the care-seeking behavior of women is more responsive to issues of illness than men?
Actually, that's one asks oneself that question. But I think part of it is the fact that women have more contact with the healthcare system than men, obligatory contact. For instance, they'll go in for antenatal service. Yeah. They'll go in for contraceptive service. They'll go in mostly to take children to hospital, okay? So it appears like there is more access, there is more contact with the healthcare system because more women are on treatment. As to whether the more women are controlled or not, that's an issue, but there are more women on treatment in Kenya than men. Okay, but women also, there are more women. But I think it is a matter of the healthcare behavior. I think there's a point in which you could say women are more health care seeking than men. Men have, you see, the way men have been characterized in Kenya is that they are independent. They're not dependent on people. Every morning you come across, every day you come across somebody who feels, I'm fine. They don't seek for help. They don't also discuss their issues. Yep. Women are more prone to discuss, tell their best friends,
not best friends, 10 best friends.
10 So no, we wait for a confirmation. I will not say yes or no.
I may be a different specimen. So
but the reality of the matter is that almost double the number of women in terms of percentage of control higher than men. But we know. So the question you raise, Dr. Muga, is really relevant. I think it is the health-seeking behavior of women appears to be more positive than men. And we see that all the time. Men are in denial. By the time you get a man to go to hospital,
something must be broken.
That's true. But we are trying to change that. This is something we need to try and change. Because, again, you find men will stay till there is a catastrophic outcome.
Men will be taken to
hospital. They'll be taken to hospital. And when they go to hospital, they'll not be taken to the general ward. They'll be taken to ICU or HDU. So we need to, this is something, a conversation that needs to be really held with men.
Dr. Yes, I'm not avoiding that particular topic.
Yes.
Because I am hypertensive. Okay. I am on medication.
Yes.
I even walk around with a gadget used for measuring blood pressure. Yes.
Yes.
I always have one.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Now, what I want to ask is, can we really talk about high blood pressure and not at least talk about low blood pressure?
Incidentally, that's a good point, because when you talk about high, you have to talk about low. But we have very, very few problems with low blood pressure. And again, low blood pressure, it depends on the context. For instance, all of us is like height. Your height is different from mine. Her height is different. Height is different. So you find that if your pressure is 90/60, okay, which in him, he will be going to see the doctor. I have low blood pressure. And that's the way you've always been, and you are optimally functional at that blood pressure. No symptoms at all. No probable cause can be found, okay? Then that's your normal blood pressure. And you're optimally functional at that point, okay? And all your medical checkups are normal. Somebody else will have a blood pressure of 130/80, and then they are on blood pressure medications, and one morning they feel dizzy, okay, they feel lightheaded, and they take their blood pressure is 90/60. It has come down by 20 to 30 and 5 to 10 on each side. That now is abnormal. So in other words, we have to really define the context. If you have high blood pressure and you end up with low blood pressure, then it's a question of, are you overdose? Are you taking extra medications than you should? Okay. Or is there something else? Or have you developed a complication like your heart has failed and therefore is no longer able to generate pressure? But so low blood pressure, and there are some circumstances under which we find people with low blood pressure. For instance, there are some people with the problems with their adrenal glands. They're not able to produce the hormones that keep our arteries tight, okay? And they come, and those are people who initially had what would be considered to be normal blood pressures, then they present with a low blood pressure. So those ones we evaluated. So we don't, as a public health issue, low blood pressure is not a major issue, but you'll find it in specific individuals and can be dealt with.
Is hypertension curable?
No, that's a good question, and it's really an issue for disease, because once you have a problem, you want to get cured.
Yep.
I mean, you want to go back to normality. Now, we talk about control. For blood pressure, we talk about three things: detection, because it's a problem, treatment, and control. So blood pressure, for the majority of the people, we talk about control, because some of the things that bring blood pressure are not just, it's not just the lifestyle. We also have, there is a genetic component to it. We can blame blood pressure also to your ancestors, okay? There is a bit of genetics which allows people's blood pressure to go much higher than it should as years go by, as we age. So there are some people, after the age of 45, genetically their blood pressures go up, okay? And those people, despite the fact that they can benefit from lifestyle interventions, they may still need a little medication to take care of the changes in their blood vessels and their hearts due to that genetic component. So, in other words, for the majority, I would say almost about 85% of the people, it is a matter of control. There are those people in whom blood pressure has been brought about, number one, by some specific medical conditions. For instance, we call them secondary hypertension. If you, for instance, you have two arteries, mostly you have two arteries supplying the kidneys with blood, two arteries. If any of those arteries were, for some reason, what you call connective tissue disease or some other, to be narrowed, then you find that because the kidney is involved in generating those enzymes, those hormones that regulate blood pressure, your blood pressure goes up. But why has your blood pressure gone up? Because you have a narrowed kidney artery. If you are producing some of these hormones that affect blood pressure, like in the adrenals, aldosterone, adrenal glands and all that around the kidneys, again, we call that secondary. In other words, blood pressure is caused by a specific disease. And the treatment of blood pressure will be treating that specific disease. Okay. If it is that narrowed artery, we'll come, put a catheter there, put a little balloon, put a little stent, open it up, and your blood pressure will be gone. If it is, so in other words, there are the secondary causes. Those ones can be cured, but it's not the majority. You're talking about maybe 5% for those secondary causes, not more than 5% of blood pressure is caused by those secondary causes. There are others who will be on some medications that raise blood pressure. They've been put on medications for this, or maybe some steroids or something like that for some other condition, maybe lupus or something, and their blood pressure goes up. Those are the curable ones. The others that are curable are the ones specifically caused by lifestyle, by diet, weight, okay, lack of physical activity, smoking, alcohol. If you've been taking a lot of alcohol and you stop, within 6 weeks, a lot of people see even up to 10, 12 millimeters reduction on blood pressure. They don't need anything else because your blood pressure is caused by alcohol. Also, tobacco will do the same. So you can see the types that are curable. But for the majority of the people, we
Control.
seek for control. And one thing we tell people is that once you are controlled, you are equal to that person who has never had blood pressure. People always say, oh, I'm going to be on medication for life. You don't lose anything. When you control your blood pressure, you are now equal to your friend who has never had blood pressure in terms of your quality of life, your length of life, except, of course, that you take a tablet every day.
Every day you have to
and
take
you
something.
pay a certain cost. Yes.
Dr. Always a pleasure having you. Always a pleasure. We look forward to having you again and wishing you at this point the very best of the holidays and the very best into the new year as well.
Oh, thank you. I really wish you the same. I wish you a very blessed Christmas and New Year, and all the listeners as well.
Asante sana.
Yes, thank
Dr. Robert Mathenge, consultant interventional cardiologist and phlebotomist, head of the cardiology section at Nairobi Hospital, and also from the Equatorial Heart and Blood Vessel Clinic. He's been our guest. We've been talking about high blood pressure, hypertension. You know what you need to do. Watch your lifestyle. It's a beginning. And even as we go into Christmas.